Thank you for your time. My name is Beitula. I appreciate you being here. Please keep in mind what we are doing here on Bet On It, Shooting from the Hip. We explore human ideas, philosophies, and noteworthy information. This exploration is us thinking aloud, a thought exercise, jumping into ideas and examining them and then re-examining them. You will find we're prone to using adult language when expressing opinions. In keeping with that, you shouldn't believe anything we say. We are not experts of any kind. We're just having fun with these ideas, philosophies, and information in the hopes that you will find it fun and interesting and entertaining. We encourage you to invest time in searching out these subjects and come to your own conclusions. Now on with the shit show. Slim, how you doing, buddy?
Pretty good. Had an active week. How are you?
Not bad, thanks. Thanks for asking. How active?
I sacrificed sleep for extra work, so that's fun.
Always good.
Yeah,
That's dedication, man.
Yeah, I hurt my hand. It healed just fine.
All things considered.
Yeah.
That's
So,
it. That
good
is
time.
good. That is good. So, we're gonna, I think, just jump into the subject of today's episode. So today it's multi topics that do overlap. So I'm just gonna outline what they are. We're gonna address the human condition, logotherapy, terror management theory, hierarchy of needs, and existentialism. And we'll try and strip the meat off the bones, if you will, right? Does that work? Okay, I'm just going to read actually the short paragraph I have with regards to the first topic, which is the human condition. It's attempting to explain what it means to be human on this earth and in this time, place, and reality. A definition is complicated for the human condition, but we're going to try and do just that, right? An attempt to define it. It can be and has been seen or defined and characterized as the key events of a human life, including birth, learning, emotions, aspiration, reason, morality, conflict, and death. It's a broad topic which always and continues to be pondered and analyzed, incorporating many perspectives, including art, biology, literature, philosophy, psychology, and religion, all in an attempt to define the human condition. As a literary term, the human condition is typically used in the context of ambiguous subjects, such as the meaning of life or moral concerns, encompassing all aspects of human nature and everything in between. It could be seen as a positive and negative aspects of being human. The origin of the word is unknown. It dates back to texts found in ancient times. All humans are part of the human condition and contribute to it. All right, so having said that, that was a wonderful mouthful. So as you can quickly see, defining the human condition, there's no one single definition. That it might be more fair to say that the human condition, which is a reflection of what it means to be human, right? So the definition tries to encompass exactly what it means to be human, the what of humanity, of being human. It's something that we may not, on average, the average person may not give it deep consideration. But the question then becomes, is it worthy of consideration? For me, it's since I first heard the term, and I think the term human condition, I first was exposed to it in my teens. So it's a very long time ago. So it's something that I've pondered and considered since that time, right? So are you familiar with the term human condition?
Yeah. It makes sense that we couldn't have a definition that jives with it exactly, because it's not one thing. It's a very non-ambiguous, but at the same time, it's very encompassing.
Right, and there have been many attempts to define what it is to be human. So they've taken a a biological perspective on it. They've also tried to explore it in art, in literature, philosophy, psychology, religion, the idea of what does it mean to be human. So here we are having this conversation, the what of the human condition. To me, it's that it's a fluid state, and it speaks to where we are currently. So depending on what era or time period you come from, the human condition might be more one thing than another in terms of the way that it's defined. So, but I think now in 2024, on the verge of 2025, and this time of great transition where our society's changing significantly, I think it's more relevant now than maybe it's ever been. So the real question is, what is the human condition? And I think part of it is how we relate to one another. So in terms of like using that as a place jumping off point, how we relate to one another, I don't know if it's worse than it's ever been historically, but we certainly do go after each other tooth and nail.
Yeah.
Right. So and it again, it's the kind of thing where you go, it really reflects poorly on the human condition, at least in terms of what it means to be human, because surely chasing each other down and verbally assaulting each other, and it, not literally, right? The availability of the internet and social media has allowed for us to basically vilify each other to no end. And now we do it so much that we can't tell what's real from what's bullshit.
Right, especially with the new advantages and disadvantages of like artificial intelligence.
Yeah, so and this isn't losing momentum. It's picking up momentum as it's moving forward.
Yeah, this will be an industry.
Yeah, so there's a part of me that thinks then that addressing the human condition, it might be more poignant to point out how much of the human condition now is being influenced by the advance of technology. We just thought it would, I think, in 1999 and early 2000, we just thought of it as you'd have the equivalent of be carrying a library around in your pocket, or access to instant access to a library, and it's become so much more than that.
Yeah, to some degree, huge advantage. Well, of course, huge advantage, of course. But at the same time, like phone addiction's huge. It seems like all of this is just pushing us into subjectivity.
Well, again, to favor your own self-interest. So hence why it might be important to bring it to people's attention that here, you can be objective in your observations, and through that objectivity, you'll be able to, at least in the moment, have a clear vision of what's actually occurring. So then, instead of getting reduced to name calling, and which ultimately are really childish tactics to sort of, they're ad hominem attacks is largely what we launch against each other. We don't attack any kind of argument that the person may or may not be making, but we go after them personally in a very personal way. So it poorly reflects on the human condition that that's what we're doing to each other. We've kind of now devolved into those 10 logical fallacies of human thinking, where we lean on those. Now any kind of objective truth, or determinate truth, a truth like that only exists in a moment, but you can observe it, isn't considered valuable. What's valuable is everything gets reduced to the win or the loss.
Right, like because people, I think, out of insecurity, try to say these things and be dissuasive.
Right, and to dismiss any kind of argument that they otherwise couldn't dismiss. So if you turn it into a personal attack, you shut down any attempt or any ability to have a conversation with the purpose of trying to understand each other better. When now it would seem to me the time it's the time's most relevant now that we actually start favoring attempting to understand each other. And maybe that could be the human condition, right? That this consistent behavior, so whether we fail at it or we succeed at it isn't nearly as important as the fact that what we're trying to do is understand each other better, right? So then the human condition, philosophically, although I'm sure academically trained philosophers wouldn't consider me a philosopher, maybe a professional bullshitter, but having said that, I am a lover of wisdom. That and no one can take that away from me, right? And as such, I think that now more than ever, this idea that, you know, if we're going to address the human condition, we can only come at it in an honest way through understanding, right? That means that you're willing to put aside your differences in an attempt to try and understand each other's motivations, right? So at least, and then that way to humanize one another. We very often get reduced to demonizing each other, like, and the fact of the matter is we're all humans. We're all essentially looking for the same things. If you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you want to be loved, you want someone to love, you want the, you know, reasonable creature comforts and a food to eat, a warm place to sleep, clothes, that sort of thing. That those are the things that link us. The fact that we're all going to die, another thing that we share that we ignore but defines our reality, and it could be a thing that we could use to understand each other better, but we don't, because, you know, at least in terms of, or in light of everything that's gone on politically in Canada here and in the U.S., it's just name calling seems to be the way to go. And this I don't get the demonization. It doesn't foster any kind of understanding. It's just this one narrative or this one ideology that it essentially will do anything to win, right?
Not to be too specific, but it's definitely awful seeing the leaders, the representatives being, like you say, ad hominem. It's this immature behavior, and it must be from insecurity, from my perspective.
Maybe the insecurity is like the fear of losing, right? And so then that kind of speaks to, at least subjectively, what biases are driving people, and the bias, that should be clear, it's consumption and competition, right? Because that would be the only thing that would create enough of an insecurity in an individual that they might lash out at somebody who's basically a threat to that, right?
It definitely seems like that. I would agree, yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame that here we have the ability now. Like, we should be not dividing ourselves further or building walls between us, but trying to connect, right? And ultimately, and I think I've stated this on numerous occasions, there's two fundamental ideologies driving every individual. Either you subscribe to the idea that we're all connected and we're all one, or that we're all separate and divided, and then it's last man standing, right? Kind of a shitty way to live. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, if that's your approach and that's how you see it, it would, not that being isolated is all that bad, but made to feel lonely, that you know that it would produce that effect. So how many of us are doing this because we just want to be with a tribe, we want to have a team, because it's better than feeling lonely. You're better served by being alone, and you don't ever have to be lonely while you're alone.
Right, and there's nothing wrong with arguments. Like, there's supposed to be civil discussions in order to find better ground.
You can disagree. Disagreement, that's at the hallmark of understanding, right? Like, it's in the disagreement because you don't see things in the exact same way, and then in the attempt to try and make each side understand the other side better, that you're able to, in that discourse, come to some kind of conclusions, even if the end result is you realize that you just don't agree. But what you've discovered as a byproduct of it is how much you have in common, how similar you are.
Yeah, sorry. I was thinking earlier. It's funny how you mentioned we have a library in our pockets, or that was the assumption. However, people
Oh,
use.
sorry, did I just kick the camera?
Yeah,
My
it's
bad.
fine.
That's okay.
But it's interesting because of the amount of division. We have these computers in our pocket. We access it. We find a video. We go, ha ha, ha. This is something rude. It's
Well,
kind of
you guys do.
ridiculous.
I don't have a phone. I proudly, have not had owned a cell phone for, I can actually say 20 years. Because I believe 2004 was the last time I actually owned a cell phone. So, but I appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm up to speed on the fact that that the availability of the technology is having a huge psychological impact on humans. So then, how are we, as a result of the convenience of these personal technologies, are we actually negatively impacting the human condition, right? Because are we creating entire generations of addicts who can't function without access to their tablet or their phone, so they can access their interconnectivity, which is kind of dishonest because they spend at least the appearance is that they spend the majority of that time in that interconnectivity being hostile towards each other.
Yeah, and it's even worse because it's a bit of a facade. They have to show a face to get likes. And then if you say something that's truly confrontational and worth a real discussion, um, oftentimes it'll be taken down because you can report any
Well,
comment you want.
right. Okay, so it's part of that cancel culture, which again, it's just you we when you have the ability and the willingness to do that, that's the kind of censorship that you would expect out of tyrants. And so now the tyrant isn't a self-imposed king on a kingdom. Now he's basically an electronic idiot who can say whatever he wants and not to suffer any consequence from his choices. Look, I'm in a very public way, and I try to be honest about what it is that I'm saying, and I'm mindful enough that I'm not trampling on other people. But if the fact that you get bent out of shape by what I say, it's not meaningful to me. In fact, fuck you. It's your problem. It's not my problem, right? I'm exercising that right that has the utmost value, the right of self-expression, right? Which is what ultimately they're doing, but they don't have they're not mindful enough to be aware of the intent of what they're saying.
Right. I noticed that you definitely put a lot of nuance to some thoughts people might find like not worth nuance, but it's like we have a variety of people. There's no reason why it wouldn't be a nuanced conversation about virtually anything.
100%. I think and again, when you're trying to foster understanding, you can't do it in 3 minutes. It requires hours of dialogue, right?
Honest and kind dialogue.
Yes, you're going to take the time out to listen to whatever somebody who's in opposition to you, what they may have to say, right? Because again, the wild thing is there might be something that resonates with you and whatever their view is or whatever it is that they might say, and that can inform a greater insight on your behalf, which you would never have gotten if you were never exposed to the information in the first place, or that particular insight or perspective or bias, their preference, right? As a result of being exposed to that, then suddenly it ignites your insights, and it opens you up to maybe a greater degree of understanding, right?
There's almost an artisan's approach we can take to this where like there's a genuine sense of community and sharing. Like we have the Library of Alexandria in our pocket.
100%. And yet we still end up using that technology to make electronic tyrants out of virtually everybody, right? Like I am like I just that they impose their will because they heard something they don't like to say. Well, it sounds to me like you're just a spoiled, immature child who's used to being pacified. So the louder you are, the faster the response is to give you a soother, to pacify you, so that you no longer are going to lash out to get that attention. And then the weird thing about the technology is that it feeds into that. So now you become insecure unless you're getting, so many likes, or people are responding in a favorable way to whatever it is that you're saying, and very often, which ends up being mindless,
Yeah.
So I'm like, here, yeah, maybe now it's more relevant than ever that you need to be paying attention to the content of your own thinking as an individual, right? Real important. Maybe that might redefine the human condition. The idea that we have to start paying attention not only to the content of our thoughts, the things that we are going to say. And all I mean by that is the intent in which you're going to say it. Are you saying it to be hostile, to be controversial because you want to trigger somebody, or you want to incite somebody into some kind of an action? Well, that's kind of dishonest. And now what you're trying to do is you're throwing gasoline on a fire. You just want to see the fireball, right? And I'm like, look, we've been doing that for so long that you'd think people will get tired of it.
Right. Because it's easy enough going, oh, I think this because of this. I feel this way because of personal circumstance. There's a certain amount of depth you can get into easily.
Right, but if you paid attention to the content of your thinking and to the content of what you're saying, that instead of rationalizing your own subjective view, because that's what when you go to the trouble to explain it, you're trying to apply reasoning so that someone can understand why you came to the conclusion that you came to, which is fair. But if your line of reasoning is flawed, then what does it say about your conclusion? It's fucking flawed.
Right, you can't make hot chocolate out of toilet water. That's kind of bad.
Well, you could, but I wouldn't recommend it.
A little extra chocolate.
Yuck. Tastes like yuck. So it's to me it's kind of weird how maybe it's not weird that here in the midst of the human condition, because we're living it, trying to understand ourselves better. I mean, isn't that why we engage in these conversations? The point is in the hopes that something it'll spark an insight in us individually that'll make you like pause and go, maybe this is worthy of more consideration. And so, and to anyone listening to this, I would say the same thing, that taking the time to kind of figure yourself out is not wasted time.
I would recommend people deserve it, especially if they're having a rough time. You deserve that little bit of patience with yourself and understanding of yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's bad enough that as a result of like this instant ability to communicate and how it's take on really nefarious kind of like air to it, then you got to meet the expectations of society, like honor your need for like an income, and can you imagine then for people who are spending like 8 to 10 hours a day working, and they're not being well rewarded. They're like maybe working at a minimum wage. It doesn't leave them a lot of time to sort of consider and ponder these things, because they're just too busy trying to meet the needs of like staying alive, right? So also part of in a contemporary conventional sense, the human condition, we're kind of breaking up into like, I don't want to say two classes, but it might be a two-class system. That those who have the ability to do this but don't, what they do is they want to ride the wave of fame and infamy or whatever, because they want to be the center of attention. They crave acknowledgement. and they use social media to that end. But that's because they have the availability of time, because they happen to be in. I don't want to use the word independent, or the words independently wealthy, but they might have enough economic advantage that allows for them to do that. Where the person struggling to meet exorbitant rents, exorbitant food costs, they don't have, there's no time for extra. They're not, they don't have the advantage because they're economically disadvantaged. So maybe the split in our society now is economically advantaged and economically disadvantaged. And again, it just fosters further division amongst us as individuals, right? And may ultimately make it all the more difficult for people to be able to think about these sort of things. This is the only thing I want to talk about. So if anyone's watching this going, yeah, he's probably economically advantaged, I'm not. I live hand to mouth, but I would rather live hand to mouth and thinking about this shit all the time than doing it any other way.
If you're comfortable with scarcity, then I would assume you've developed skills in order to adapt to that scarcity. So like people that spend their time on the internet all the time, typically it's going to be people that have too much time. Like you say, they're advantaged. They're probably not going to be terribly competent, but somebody who's fought through that kind of like, oh, I have no time, but I'm going to struggle and get through more. Those skill sets are actually needed. So it's unfortunate. The quiet people are the people we need typically.
I think it's a matter of the way you schedule your day and how disciplined you are, so, and motivated to do so. And on all three of those counts, I'm highly motivated, highly disciplined, and I adhere to like a personal schedule that that includes like adequate rest and personal downtime. So I don't spend a lot of time on the internet entertaining people. I don't engage in anyone coming after me verbally in a hostile manner. I just don't even acknowledge. I'm like, say whatever you want, right? I could care less. I'm not wasting what valuable time I have. I'm trying to make them either understand or dismantle their argument, especially if their argument is just name calling. So if it's just that being reduced to name calling, fuck you again, right? So. But I think it's I do it to honor myself. I go because there's so much that I would like to do, and then there's only so many hours in a day, and then I spend my whole day I'm juggling. So I'm flexible enough that I'm able to adapt the schedule to things I can't anticipate happening, but I still manage to do all the things that I not only want to do, the things I'm also required to do, right? So, and I don't know any other way to live, right? So, and again, it might speak to the idea of the human condition that downtime's not a problem. Idle time, empty time, could be problematic, right? But as an individual, it's up to you to kind of to figure that shit out, right? You have to make the determinations in terms of like how you're going to manage yourself and your time, because ultimately that's what we're talking about. So part of the human condition is then possibly taking into account the time you have and how would you prefer to spend that time, right?
If you want to socialize by being mean to people, typically I would see when I was younger, like friends do it to each other, and that's a space where it's actually a safe environment. It's genuine.
But when it's among friends, everyone's just they're looking for the funniest dig. It's all done with a sense of humor. It's not done with malicious intent, right? Like typically, right?
I would say that's a healthy way to go about it, but the way it seems people are developing these like argumentative skills is now just nearly cultish.
Well, you see that like the streams that they'll go on where they'll tear into each other, tear into each other's argument, and again, ultimately the only impression. Not that I read a ton of them, but once in a while when I'll see two people arguing online, and I'll just read both sides, and to me, it has all the appearances of two spoiled children just basically lashing out at each other, right? So I'm like, so maybe that's another hallmark of the human condition, this idea, this lack of emotional maturity, that we're still behaving like spoiled children. So, perhaps it's time to grow up, right? Fuck off and grow up, or grow up and fuck off. You can take your pick. But I think there's serious value in the idea that we can't walk around being emotionally retarded and stunted, and then deal with other adults from that position. The only outcome that it'll produce is name calling. It's because that's where immaturity goes. Eventually, if they can't sustain a constructive argument, then they'll just resort to name calling, right? Ad hominem attack, right? Or they'll do the straw man. They'll reiterate what you just said, but to reflect a bias, and then they'll attack the reiteration of your argument,
Right.
which wasn't a genuine reflection of the argument you made.
That's always something curious to stumble on, because like you think about, you can source, you can be polite, you can do whatever if you genuinely care. But then there's some people who won't even read your message but attack you for it. Like, why would you care?
Well, again, I think it speaks to this idea that here in this significant time of transition for all of humanity, not just here in the West,
Oh yeah.
everywhere, we're all going through this, is that perhaps now more than ever that we need to sort of try and aspire to be emotionally mature, right? And speaking from my bias, meditation is a proven method of acquiring emotional maturity, right? So it's one of the only methods that I'm aware of where you can do that. And remember, I've made this argument, ad nauseum. But the idea is that you're trying to train yourself to be present, so you can recognize the contents of your own thoughts and the things that you are saying, and then to address them in such a way where you're not judging them. You're going, what are you doing when you say this? You're just asking yourself questions. Why are you doing this way? Right? So paying attention is very difficult, especially when you have something that's constantly distracting you, right? How many people, like their mobile device, they're constantly on all their social media, so it's immediate direct access, and it goes off. The bell rings like Pavlov's dog, and you respond. And it doesn't matter what format or which form of social media you're getting the input from. It's stimuli that's conditioning your behavior, and it's training you to be more short with your attention. And so then it makes you prone to emotional outbursts. Well, that's emotional immaturity, right? So here we are trapped, and nobody wants to have this conversation. And if you do, you're a downer, man.
This is kind of unfortunate. I know you're not terribly familiar with like the other social medias, but you have Facebook.
That's right.
You know the feature where you can scroll, and then you can scroll, and then it's an endless feed.
Yeah.
That's all social media now.
Well, but of course, why else would it be anything else?
How
Right?
dare you? How dare somebody have like a finite amount of text, like a blog? It's like, no, you have to have access to them, and then their friends, then suggestions from that.
Well, which is fine. Like I'm unabashedly, I use Facebook to promote what we do here. Right? That's all I do. I post memes that I'm hoping will provide insights for people, but may largely make them annoyed. And in either event, I don't care, right? I'm only ever on long enough to post shit, and then I completely ignore it. And I use it in the way that it was intended to be used, a way to stay in touch with friends and contacts, and it's more relevant for me because I don't have a cell phone, so I do it all from a desktop computer. But when I log out, I walk away from that computer. I don't give it a second thought. I don't worry about what other people are doing or not doing. Uh, it would drive you insane. But it again, it behooves me then at least in the course of conversation to sort of try and bring it to people's attention. Hey, do you see what you might be doing here, right?
Yeah.
That's it, and I just stop there. I don't want to be known as somebody who thinks he knows better and has no problem telling people what to do. I'm happy to help you out, but the only way this really works is if you do the work, and all we're doing is providing a way for you to sort of maybe intellectually to entertain these ideas in the hopes that then eventually what it may produce is an insight that allow for the individual to maybe change, evolve. Change is a universal constant. So you shouldn't be stagnant. You shouldn't be the same person you were a year ago, a week ago, a month ago, 10 years ago. You should be in a state of evolution. And what's more interesting now than ever is the fact that you can direct that evolution. You can pick the direction it goes in. You can choose to evolve into whatever it is that you want. And if you don't choose, you don't actively make that effort, that means something else or someone else is influencing your evolution. Do you really want it left in the hands of somebody else? Really?
That's a great place to bring it, especially with just the general confusion over what the correct narrative is. It seems across the world. Not to be dramatic about it, but
I think it's universally true. I think it's not a euphemism to say that all of humanity is in a state of transition. We're all trying to understand. There's some of us who are so frightened by an attempt to understand that they'll go back to what's comfortable. And what's comfortable and what's easy is to be judgmental, to live in your biases, and then to look down your nose at everybody who's not on the same team as you. No teams, right? Fuck teams. There's only one tribe. It's humanity. But if you're a fucking flag waver and an ass kisser, somebody who can't stand on your own, you're gonna be like the orcs from Lord of the Rings. You're gonna congregate together, and you're basically gonna feed on each other when you don't have anyone else to feed off of, right? So I'm like, come on, doesn't have to be like this anymore. We've been at it for such a long time, at least 6,000 years that we're aware of, and very likely and very potentially even more. But with a degree of accuracy, we can say the last 5,000 years we kind of have a relatively decent picture. And in terms of the way the human condition has evolved, it's essentially the same thing. We're still competing, we're still consuming, and trying to outconsume each other and trying to outcompete each other. And it's contributed to a piss poor human condition.
yeah, I'm really surprised. I feel like people were more aware of it the past 10 years. That's really ramping up. But it seems like it would have been something almost obvious beforehand. But like you say, I don't think people really review themselves, like the introspection, intra.
I think it's because one, it's kind of uncomfortable. You have to take a look at yourself, put yourself under the microscope, look at yourself in the mirror, and it's difficult. It produces lots of discomfort, and it's already from a population that has an aversion to being made to feel uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, what? Not to pick on Canadians specifically, but Canadian state of mind. You drop something, you're so upset about it. Oh, I broke something that I dropped. I'm the problem.
Is that a Canadian thing? I don't. I don't get that.
No, but I just feel like it's it's too easy to go like, oh, because there's a flaw, I am the flaw. But you're right, it's not just
Well,
Canadian.
but that's just blame. So why? So if you were raised by somebody who every time you erred went out of their way to assign blame to you for the error, for the failure, and then it shouldn't surprise you then because that's a form of conditioning, that it's a learned behavior, that you start doing it to yourself, and then it's not bad enough that you do it to yourself.
Mm.
You also now in your relationships start doing it to other people. But most of us are smart enough to know that you can't be up like that up front about that kind of negativity. So you have to sort of veil it. You have to present with a smiling face, and then it makes you trains us to be dishonest and disingenuous. And I'm like, here we're at a place now where we can choose a fork in the road. You can choose a direction, and I would opt for a healthier, you know, a direction where you're forced to mature, you're forced to grow, you're forced to evolve, and in that evolution, you may end up discovering the best of what you are. I go, that to me, there's way more value in the attempt to discover the best of what you are than to live trapped in this habitual patterns of behavior where essentially you're living the same day every day for 70 years and then you die.
I can see how it would be easy for somebody to continue blaming themselves, like, oh, instead of I just dropped the cup, it broke. I'm the problem now.
No, it's not. Here's the thing. It's not a problem.
You're right.
It's just a cup fell and broke. The only thing now that you need to do is, are you going to clean it up? Or are you going to leave it there? And the most responsible thing you can do is like, clean the fucking shit up. That's it. You just have to take responsibility for yourself. Is it a guarantee? No, but this life doesn't come with guarantees, and that's I find it kind of curious how often that's what people want. They want some form of guarantee that this course of action will lead to a very specific outcome. And I go, life does not work like that. And anyone who tells you that it does, they're selling you something, and they hope you're a sucker or that you're so desperate that you'll believe whatever they're saying and part with your money. I don't have an agenda. I'm not selling nothing, and I don't care if you believe me, if you don't believe me. All right? All right, why? Because we're not experts of any kind. We're just two guys having a conversation, and you are privileged to be able to listen in on the conversation. That's it.
It's definitely a good way to do like all of this because it seems like we always steel man a lot of points of views, and in that nuance, it's like you say, we run over the same conversations a lot, but they're good conversations.
Yeah, it's conversations whose time has come. They're worthy. They're worthy of us. It's the kind of thing that would in the most positive way impact you. So why wouldn't you be talking about this stuff? And if you're avoiding talking about this stuff, you're just somebody who's looking to be distracted. You want to avoid anything meaningful, anything that might force you out of your comfort zone. You know, I'm comfortable being uncomfortable, and I never chose this. I was like when I was your age. I was super well programmed. I did everything exactly in the way that I was expected to do. And then when it wouldn't produce the outcome that it was guaranteed, then you turn on yourself, go, oh, it must be you. Like you're the problem, right? No, it couldn't be further from the truth. You learn more from failing, but the fact that you failed says that you made an effort. So the most important thing that you can do is to make the effort. Whether you succeed or fail doesn't matter. You just keep making the effort. And as a result of that, gain potentially very deeper, more profound insights about the human condition, about what it means to be human. right? So you're looking for meaning to life. Define the human condition. Redefine it. Constantly redefine it.
I did have something to say.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't.
No, it's fine.
Did I take away your momentum?
No. I'm interested. It seems like, I mean, we totally agree. In order to steel man yourself, become the best yourself you can be, you have to fail again and again and
Yes,
again.
it's a requirement. You only learn as a result of failure.
The people who continuously succeed on the first try don't have the benefit of knowing why things fail.
And and when they do experience a failure, it'll be a crippling loss to them because they've never experienced what it is to fail.
That can easily be seen in like university students that burn out, drop out. It's like they ran 8 classes for a semester. That's a lot.
Yeah, like those dramatic overachievers who end up crashing into a wall because they're trying to sustain something that should only ever be attempted in the short term. But they're thinking that they can, if they can just do this for the long term, it'll produce this very specific outcome. But they don't account for the fact that, like, hey, there's some frailty in being human, and there is such a thing as too much. And that too much can lead to all sorts of problems, psychological, physical, you name it, right? No balance, right? No understanding.
They're also fighting for something that they might not appreciate the same way they would have if they took a balanced approach.
Right.
That's kind of generalizing the point,
Yeah,
but
but
yeah.
it doesn't make it less accurate. Like, look, a healthy perspective is because you're able to recognize when you're in over your head. So if you're swimming and you've been swimming for laps, and now you're at a point where now, like, it's difficult for you to sustain it, and you're kind of periodically dipping under the water level, might be a good time to get out of the pool because you know what comes next, right? So again, but that requires you to be present and have the wherewithal to go, okay, enough's enough. And it's, time for rest, time for a break, time for something else, right? That
I'm
long
with you.
awkward pause.
No, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, like I said, it's just it's it's just one of those things that, like, there's so many of us suffer needlessly, and you don't have to, right? So I'll just finish in terms of, like, the human condition. We'll just sort of close kind of on that. It's not really closed because the human condition does relate to. Damn it! I kicked the camera again. Sorry, my bad.
Hey, I'm kicking it
It's
next.
okay.
It's my turn.
So we're gonna move on to Rene Descartes. And he was born in March 1596, and he died in February 1650. And he was a French philosopher and scientist, mathematician, widely considered critically important in the emergence of modern philosophy, science, right? In Latin, cogito ergo sum usually translates into English as I think, therefore I am, right? So again, this speaks to the evolution of the human condition and his significant contribution to it, right? As someone who thinks, then you exist, you are, right? But I think it has to, again, he just takes that first step, but that entire line of reasoning has to evolve, right? So, and his first principle, philosophically and scientifically, the first principle is a basic proposition or assumption that cannot be deduced from any other proposition or assumption. So, proposition defined as a statement or assertion that expresses a judgment or an opinion. Assumption defined as a thing that is accepted as true or as certain to happen without proof, right? So did that make sense what I just read?
Yeah, it's a starting off point, like axiomatic statement to provide like a stable, I want to say like secure understanding.
Right,
But
to come to reasonable conclusions.
right, but I'm thinking of that as it sounds more like philosophy in the sense of like if you are non-thinking, then
Then
are you being?
maybe you're not. To me, um, the highest expression of being is being present. That means not thinking. Or what he states is that I think, therefore I am, and I'm like, I would go so far as to say that I'm not thinking in structured thoughts, but I am present awareness. Therefore I am. So it's the awareness behind the thoughts that you're thinking. So pause on that, consider that for a moment. So the actual thoughts, the structured thoughts that are structured into language, where now you're contemplating and entertaining a very specific idea, um, that 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 structure of thinking is not who you are. He states that I think, therefore I am. That because you have that structured thinking, you are. I would say that what drives that structured thinking, that consciousness that is self-aware, that doesn't require definition like or language or structure. It's just presence. That's what you are. So I love Rene Descartes, but having said that, remember that in whatever ideas you're going to promote, you can trick yourself, you can rationalize yourself into a position that's kind of nonsensical, right? Because you can argue to rationalize a position. So you're not being rational. There's a distinct difference. You're rationalizing your position. You're providing an explanation where the idea is that it should make somebody hearing it go, oh, that makes sense.
Right, it's not the same as thinking.
Right.
It's bias. It's like prejudice.
Right. All those things get played out. So if it's an unbiased thought or thinking, then that makes you kind of present, right?
Yeah, I don't think I've thought about that quotation that way. Even though, like, I mean, you just went through the whole reasoning versus reasonable kind of thing.
Well,
But
or rationalizing a position versus being rational. Being rational means that you take all the evidence, you weigh all the evidence, and then you draw a conclusion because you follow rational thinking. That
right,
like if all this evidence is together and all of it overlaps, then it says something specific. So you come to a conclusion, a rational conclusion. But it can work the other way, that you can rationalize an irrational position and make it sound rational.
right, and there's tons of jokes. I like that.
Isn't the entire political spectrum based on rationalizing the irrational?
Right, it's you are like this, therefore you are that other thing. I'm assuming. I just want to like point out that like the phrasing I'm using is complicated here, but I think the way you spoke about that, I keep saying like rational
Yeah,
reasoning,
it's okay. Just
but I think the way you brought that up is it's like perfect because if he wanted to have a simple answer to that question, he would have said, I be, therefore I am. Knock it out of the park with this real stupid, silly, easy answer. But to go, I think, therefore I am. That's that's more than an acceptance of the reality. It's also the function of the reality in its like the peak of peaks. Because the being is the thinking. It's not the rationalization. It's not the reasoning. It's not the
right. So then, if we follow that line of reasoning based on what he said about assumptions, the assumption is that if you think, therefore you are, and that to me, I would argue against that. That just because you're thinking, because there's tons of examples of people who think, They think all the live long fucking day, and they think about stupid shit, or they think about self-interested things.
Yeah.
So that doesn't make it makes them who they are, but that's the problem. It's that structured thinking, because all it ends up reflecting is self-interest, bias, preferences, all the shit that we've ever outlined in terms of subjectivity, and it avoids seeking proof,
Yeah.
right? Because proof to support that, because if you approached an irrational bias and go, I need proof for it, and you looked and you looked and you looked and you couldn't find any proof, then you would realize that maybe your irrational bias is just that, irrational.
I was thinking it reflects, or it relates directly to one thing I've heard you say a million times. It's like if you have an institution and it's based, I don't know how you say this exactly, but if you have an institution, eventually um, what's done within the institution will evolve and change, and it will no longer need the brick and mortar structure. It's going to need to evolve. It can't just be one stagnant thing. Our minds are quite literally the same in the sense that we are a structured way of thinking. Those structured ways of thinking must be reviewed. Like it's worth questioning.
Yes, that they should be questioned, but most of us don't,
Right.
right? And so if you're gonna live from those biases, which are propositions, they're an assertion that you have that expresses your judgment or your opinion. Well, if it's based on nothing, then it's a wild assertion or a wild opinion that's only based on what you personally think.
And if you're informing the structure as you have these questions, you're informing them in a way that, subjective. It's going to ruin you in the end.
Right, and there are entire institutions that were created around opinions and judgments, right? That were unsubstantiated. They're baseless and unsubstantiated, and those who promote them don't have to offer up anything other than the fact that this is what I think, right? And here I'll hide behind something else to lend credence to what I'm saying.
Right. I'm thinking the figureheads, as long as they're, I don't want to say like confident, but they show a confidence facade. All they have to do is be able to reason it enough that people don't want to think about it.
That's right. So they can rationalize their biases or preferences or prejudices or opinions, which are all subjective. So you have to, and people argue this all the time, that you can't separate yourself from your subjective views, and I'm like, that's not true. That's again another irrational kind of rationalization about being rational, that you can suspend whatever opinions, biases, or preferences that you have, and then look at whatever you're looking at and just see the fact of whatever it is. So that means details, the details of whatever it is, which are the facts, and those facts will illustrate something very particular. That's an objective observation.
If you're being objective, you are. We've said this a million times. If you're objective, you're in a better place to restructure
Your own thinking,
Yeah,
right? So that you don't.
because the facts are there. You can't, like, you're going to end up lying to yourself about the reality otherwise.
Right, because instead of interpreting or treating it as a perception, you go, what do the facts state? If anything, what do they state? Because it'll point to a significant direction. So is that a judgment? In a manner of speaking. Is it an opinion? It's an informed opinion. See the difference, right? So once it comes from an informed position, then you can support the claims that you're making because you can prove them, right? Proof, right? Statistical data, empirical data, right? And if you're dealing with something where you can't apply statistics or empirical data, then you acknowledge that and you go, here, we can't prove it one way or the other. All right, so, and again, I don't have any problem coming to a place where you suddenly realize there's no evidence to support what's being said.
I assume a lot of issues will be like that because it seems like because of the environment we're in, it's just going to lead further and further away from arguments we should be having if we want to fix a point.
Or maybe discussions instead of arguments.
Yeah, because
Right? Like that we could just talk. Yeah, we could just talk about stuff.
Yeah, because a discussion allows both sides to make their own
Express,
points.
right, to express their opinion, and then you can suspend your disbelief in whatever they might be saying, and just go, here, I'm willing to entertain what you have to say, and then we can decide after you've presented your a position or an argument or in the course of the discussion. Then we can look at it and go, hey, what about it is erroneous? What about it? What about what you're presenting is true?
Right,
In terms of like evidence based.
Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, it's okay. No, not at all.
I was gonna say it seems like there's structured formats of these arguments for whatever issue you want to put out there, and it seems like people are sharing the structured arguments, but they're not receiving the information from the argument and deconstructing and doing all the things you laid out.
Right. It's because it's time consuming and it requires you to be broad and open. And most of us, that makes most people uncomfortable. They want to feel comfortable. So what could be more comfortable than a position that they hold to be true without any evidence? But they're so acclimated to it that they're comfortable with that, right? They're comfortable with the fact that they can't they can't provide evidence, but they can talk about it as though it's an absolute, right? So again, it kind of works counter to the human condition, right? That we have to at some point we're required to evolve, right? Or we're going the opposite direction, and that we could be chosen by nature for extinction, right?
I mean, with the advent of science, we're definitely going to stave off a lot of issues, but it seems like people saw this coming, where we lost the advantage of just basic philosophy. Why do I do this? What's the purpose?
Again, because they're questions. They're questions that you can't answer easily, and they're kind of left, and for the most part, unanswerable, and that makes people uncomfortable. People want a definitive answer, so they can rest in the comfort and security of that definitive, absolute, view of the way everything is, and it's like, it's okay, God's going to save me, right? Or I just have to wait and be patient, and the Savior will come, and then we'll have salvation. I'm make the argument you can't prove or disprove that even such a thing exists. And I'm like, but what you could do is you could save your own ass.
Yeah, the scariest thing you could tell somebody that's not confident is like, hey, life's an adventure. They go, adventure, so I have to explore?
Yeah, you have to take risks. You have to step out into the world. You have to be willing to do things you've never done before. And then as a result of doing that, it opens you up and gives you a broader perspective on everything, right? But you can only have that by doing things. And as I often tell my nieces who are like completely plugged in, you're not, that's not your experience. You're watching someone else's experience, right? And you laugh at it, at the silly nature of it, or whatever the appropriate response, but that's not your experience. You have to go out and live experiences, right? Oh, I don't want to learn how to ride a bike. I go, you're 9. It's once you start writing it, you'll wonder what you ever did without it, or what you did without it before you actually learned to write. It's the point that there's something about that allows for a personal evolution beyond the obvious, which is coordination and physical conditioning and all that stuff. But you'd sit there and you go, it enriches you because you conquered it, because you had the ability now to overcome something that you were insecure about, which you no longer have to be insecure over, right? That's where, to me, that's where the value is. And so being human might, or the human condition might be better served by you willingly going out and seeking new and novel experiences for the purposes of growth as an individual. So you're not doing it just to have the experience, but here I want to evolve as a human being, right? So evolution seems to be or personal evolution in terms of this conversation seems to be the thing that is the thread that's running through so far human condition and Rene Descartes. But let's just jump real quickly from there into existentialism. Again, I'm just throwing more gas on the fire, all right? So go ahead. There's something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, you definitely laid the groundwork to go, okay, we have human condition, we definitely have mixed reactions to what's going on with it.
Yeah, the human condition is not easily defined, right? And you can come at it from a number of disciplines. So from science to art to literature. Well, I guess literature is art, but virtually from any perspective. And the thing is, what we're talking about is the current state of humans. And the current state of humans, as we outlined initially, not so great, right? And it's tied to technology and the way that it's impacting us, and we have no idea what the long-term effects of or the impact of these technologies, which are also evolving, right? So again, what it means, 20, 30, 50, 40, 100 years from now, we can't even begin to imagine. And I think science fiction and science and religions have poorly prepared us for what potentially is going to happen in the next 50 to 100 years.
Not to start a tangent.
This
is for the viewer. How long ago did the resistor was it invented? Like a couple hundred years.
Everything significant has happened in the last 100 years.
So on with the shit show.
And that was essentially 5,000 years in the making. It took 5,000 years to get to a place where the growth was so exponential. In the last 100 years, we evolved so significantly that, like, we're talking about populating, like, our nearest planetary neighbor. We're instant communication across the globe. Right? So,
spectacular.
Right. So to presume that somehow it's outside of your preview, that you as an individual are not going to be around long enough to experience the extent of the evolution that's before us. Think about how much it's evolved in the last 20 years. Never mind the last 100. In the last 20 years, we made some of the most disturbing and significant leaps forward technically and psychologically. What we've learned about ourselves has all largely really occurred. There was a preamble that came from the decades prior, but think about the last 20 years. How much shit has evolved, right?
It seems like we're deconstructing this concept of materialism, or not the concept, but the perspective of materialism.
So then the human condition might also be a reflection then of what we treat with value. And maybe these old ideas like the materialist model, like consumption and competition, maybe those are things that are slowly falling away, right? Because you can't ignore how divided we are now over some of the most ridiculous and silliest fucking things, and we're willing to do horrible shit to each other.
I knew this was I knew this was going to be a huge issue I think most people did when the whole pineapple on pizza thing became an issue. Because it's like, it's silly. It's a joke. It's people recognizing we have stupid arguments. And it's like pineapple on pizza. It's like, is it significant?
Not really.
Sorry about that. But
No, but again, it's a perfect reflection of preference, which is another way of saying bias or opinion. So what? So big deal. You like, Hawaiian pizza. Excellent. Good for you. Right? Like sweet and salty. Right
yeah,
on. Cool. Not my thing.
that's a terrible human condition. It's like, oh, I have to fight on this hill or
I'm
else.
going to die on this hill, on this argument. To me, it's just, again, not worthy of us, right? So that's maybe the question you should ask: is it worthy of you? No, no. Well, if it's not, then treat it incidentally. That's what it is. It's incidental, right? So we're going to jump into existentialism now. So the philosophical inquiry exploring the existence of individual humans and concludes that despite the absurdity and incomprehensibility of the universe, individuals must still embrace responsibility for their actions and strive to lead authentic lives. 100% agree. Right? So that's the definition of existentialism. And most of us encounter it in our teens when we experience existential dread because we don't have a clear, for us at that time, for so many of us, we don't have a clear definition of what it means to be human, like, and trying to answer those questions. And it takes a long time for us to just be comfortable with the uncertainty. There's lots of people who turn to organized faith, and it provides them the comfort to address that existential crisis, right? But for so many of us, it's something that you struggle to reach some degree of understanding.
I mean, it's kind of understandable. It's comfortable to have a role given to you and to fail, the criteria, succeed on the criteria. However, when somebody says life's an adventure and you die at the end, regardless of how successful
Yeah,
you were.
yeah. Not ultimately, at the end of the day, then none of it matters. So then you should treat it as such. But you're still expected to behave in a responsible way, to conduct yourself as though the time that you're here is important.
I mean, if you get it once, yeah, 100%. If you get
What
it 100 times,
what does it matter? You don't know. Here's the thing: we don't know. Do you return? Is there reincarnation? Are you reborn?
yeah. If you got one,
Well, I'm just saying, we
yeah,
don't definitively know. There's a lot of people who, just purely on faith, they're like, yeah, it's true.
yeah. Kevin told me, I know.
So
Uh, but if you live once, you only live once. If you live multiple times, okay, are you going to create a society you want to come back to?
but here's the thing: because we don't know, then the real question is, because you're here, what are you going to do with the time that you have while you're here?
Right.
So how do you conduct yourself? We take responsibility for yourself. You could be completely irresponsible, run reckless and wild, and uh, and I think the only thing you'll come to is a very short conclusion. But if you want to have a satisfying and enriched experience of being here, you treat the fact that you're here, that you're supposed to be here. It's important that you're here, and that the best way to conduct yourself while you are here is to be responsible for yourself while you are here, right? And then as a result of that, it may lead to like greater and better and higher quality experiences. And then doesn't that contribute then to the human condition in the most positive kind of way, right? That here you can act as a what do they call them? The social influencers.
Oh yeah.
Each and every one of us can be a positive influencer without it having to be with regards to social media. It's just the way that you conduct yourself and the way that you live from minute to minute, for the entire duration of the time you're here, however many minutes you have in total. And if you're lucky, it'll lead to 100 years or not.
I mean, I would 100% agree. It seems like the way you stated it is specifically way better than going into the divisionist way of like, oh, there's finite, there's grouping, there's this, there's
Yeah, so
that.
I'm going to do whatever I want to satisfy my impulses and satisfy my needs. Except the problem with that is that it that will occur largely at the expense of other people. So it's completely irresponsible. It's you only giving a shit about you.
Yeah, people used to say, oh, there's terror, the emotion terror. There's activities that drive terror. Now
What's fear?
right now people put this entire like they throw this category at people like it's a damned crown, like a bad one, and they go, "Oh, you are the embodiment of terror." So it's this dismissive wave of the hand. We've been through this. Okay.
Well, I'm just saying, I appreciate what you're saying, but what I'm saying is that you have choice.
Right.
So then the question becomes, what kind of choices are you going to make? Right? Are you going to behave responsibly or irresponsibly? It gets reduced to really only two choices. And the result of being irresponsible, you foster greater degrees of division, you create victimization, exploitation for personal gain or personal satisfaction, which is only limited. But accepting responsibility for existence and then responsibility for the world at large and everyone else that's in it, and suddenly you have this enriched experience, and you're not required to exploit anybody to have a sense of adventure, to have a sense of satisfaction, to feel genuinely good about yourself, right? So in this case, existentialism contributes to the human condition in the most positive way only if you approach it with the sense of responsibility, right? And that you're responsible for all your actions, and you strive to be an honest version of yourself. You're authentic. You're who you really are.
Doing that will also provide you um, a place to understand more easily. Because, like I mentioned before, you throw the crown at the guys, like the damn crown, the bad one, the worst of worst people. If you give that person the reverence they deserve, they still may be bad. However, you admit the reality. You're drawing the map more accurately and you're venturing more accurately.
Well, I think that part of it is the way that we educate each other. So if your education or brainwashing or social conditioning, however, whatever term you would use to characterize uh, how we inform the generations coming up behind us or each other.
Right.
So if what you're doing is you're teaching them to be self-interested, to react out of fear. Remember, if you're responding to emotions, you're having a reaction, uh, that's impulsive. But if you're well educated and well trained in the ability to reason, and you take responsibility for your own existence and all your actions, then you'll be unmoved by your emotions, which creates room for you then to now choose a course of action, right? That instead of being reactionary and impulsive, now you can be thoughtful, and as a result of that thoughtfulness, you can make decisions that not just benefit you, but benefit others, because you, instead of addressing the whatever, because it all gets reduced to problem solving, instead of resolving the problem for your own advantage, you resolve the problem in the most efficient way to resolve the problem. So you don't view yourself as a consideration. What you do is you go, here, what's the most efficient and effective way to address this problem, and then resolve the problem. I go, but that requires you to go, yeah, it's all a joke, and yeah, it's so grand I can't conceptualize. Like when I hear people talk about a million light years, A million light years. So exactly how many miles does light travel in a second? And I gotta imagine a million light years.
Yeah.
I got inconceivable, right? No, your mind, you can't wrap your head around it. It just becomes mumbling words, right? So the very where we exist, it's kind of absurd and largely incomprehensible. And because it is, then you can succumb to the weight of that, or you can rise to it. So rising to it means taking responsibility for the fact that you're here and going, here, I'm here because this is where I'm supposed to be right now.
As an adventurer, with the state of mind that's in presence, like it's present, I feel like you would be able to look at issues as like free cake instead of just, oh, this is a burden. It's like it may be a burden, it may be a gift in order to find more skills.
Well,
I mean, some things are just burdens.
right, but it's you're right. Your attitude with regards to it, that's important. So if you take an attitude that that everyone's out to get you, or that this, like, why do you have to endure this? That's you trying to explain to yourself or rationalize to yourself why you're faced with this, whatever it is that you might having to endure, or you can decide that it's something that you need to be present for, and that you need that it provides you an opportunity to, again, to find or to draw out the aspects of yourself that'll allow for you to deal with it, right? And again, sometimes it just might be what you end up discovering is that you're just going to tolerate, that it's just about creating a higher tolerance for things that are unpleasant. Maybe that's the only takeaway from it. But to be okay with it, you don't take that shit personal. It's not doing it to you specifically. It's just something that's happening and you happen to be there. So then it falls to you to deal with or not to deal with it. Right? Hard lessons to wrap our heads around, but so important. You're there. Why are you waiting for someone else to come and do something about it? Particularly when you demonstrate the capacity to do something about it. Maybe not directly, but in an indirect way, you have the capabilities to resolve whatever the issue is, but you're too busy bitching and too busy being angry, emotional, right? Reactionary. Instead of going, here, I'm here. I can do something. So do something about it. Right? Super simple. But no one's ever talked to each other like this. Right? And people, and again, I can understand why people would feel threatened by that kind of reasoning.
I feel like it definitely deserves more than enough, or it deserves more than just like one podcast to review this. But it certainly seems like the working class people who don't have time to like delve into the intellectualism that some of the materialists get into, they have a common phrase. It's like, oh, this is work to be done, so get it done.
Yeah.
There's no extra thought. It's more objective, even though they're probably trained to be subjective, like factory workers, and you hear the bell. I mean, that was a snap, but you hear the bell and you know what to do.
Well, like I said, to me, the existentialism is a kind of way to look at yourself and to look at life, and to try and appreciate it in the broadest scale. That you live in this place that's not easily defined. You're not entirely sure what it is, and you're not alone. You live with all these other living things, and you're forced to interact with them. And then the question has to be asked: how do you do that? And there are different ways of doing it, and some of them are super exploitive, which we've had for 5,000 years. conquer nature. We force it to do our bidding. The last think about when we went from hunter-gatherers into agrarian societies. We domesticated ourselves as much as we domesticated plants and other animals, and that had a huge impact on plants, animals, and humans.
Right, like the huge amount of anxiety I see in the general public, that's weird. Like, people shouldn't have social anxiety to the extent where you're walking down a road and you're afraid to be like loud or laughing too loud or whatever. It's like, sorry, I'm thinking of a specific instance that happened to me and a friend. I was being loud. They're like, we're in public. I'm like, I'll walk around like a monkey. Does it matter?
No, it doesn't. But again, it's the herd looking after the outliers,
Yeah.
right? Like, don't do that.
It jokes on
Black
them. I'm
sheep.
having fun.
Yeah. I'm like, I go, it's because people are too caught up in other people's shit because they think that their shit doesn't stink. They think everybody else's does.
They don't. I think a lot of people don't want to stick out from the crowd because they're scared, like,
Well,
the proud nail gets struck.
They're frightened of a reaction, right? An unpleasant one. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So now to accommodate what somebody who's a curmudgeon, like fuck you.
Right.
You need the problem is the curmudgeons deciding that they know better and now need to inform you because you're misbehaving, and what you're doing in the grand scheme of things, in the cosmic scale of shit, the fact that you're fucking being loud walking down the street is somehow offensive to the gods. Shut the fuck up.
Right. If there's levity to it, have fun. If you're running around a pool,
Well, but even still. Right, like I'm going.
Take
like,
a risk.
Of all the things that you decide are worthy of negative attention, that you deserve to correct someone's behavior because you don't like what they're doing, being loud is one of them. Come on.
Right.
Right. The world is full of serious problems, and then the best thing that some individual, some curmudgeon can do is summon up the willpower to bitch about somebody else's behavior. Fuck off. Like, it's just so utterly ridiculous that it's not worthy of even discussing. But it needs to be said because guess what? It happens.
Yeah, funny enough, common turn of phrases, stay safe. Maybe don't stay safe. Just don't stay safe.
Yeah.
Adventure.
Get out there. Live where you fear to go. Right? Become uncomfortable. Right? My bias is to have no bias. My bias is to be comfortable being uncomfortable. All of us need to start rethinking the way that we do shit. Because what you'll discover is, if you're really honest with yourself, is you'll see that a large part of your problems are a direct result of the content of your thinking and the content of the emotions that you experience on a regular basis, and which trap you into habitual patterns of behavior, right? Because you become addicted to those as a result, because you're addicted to your biological, physiological response to thoughts and feelings. That's the trap. That's why some people are so close-minded, because it's more comfortable to be secure in the delusion than it is to address and face the reality, which is very uncertain.
I mean, that's how some people turn themselves into slaves and some people turn themselves into tyrants.
Well, it's the thing that we're confronted with, right? Like, and nobody wants to have that conversation. They just want to go on living their lives in whatever desperation that they're comfortable in, and then with their particular form of distraction, so they don't have to face their own existence. That's not living, right? That's just you repeating the same pattern of behavior the same day over and over and over until you expire, when you could have a richly engaging life, full of challenge, full of failure, full of personal evolution that's directed by you, because suddenly you start to see yourself for what you are, and then you can make real choices about what you would choose to be, right? So that, and this really does dovetail into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but very specifically, his last need, which is self-actualization, right? And it's the one that's haunted me since I was a kid, when I was first introduced to the hierarchy of needs, which would have been, I think, might have been the 8th grade, 9th grade, can't be sure. But self-actualization refers to the realization of a person's potential and self-fulfillment, and seeking personal growth and peak experiences to do what you feel you are meant to do and to be who you are meant to be, right? Now, to be fair, I'll just quickly outline all of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Because before you can get to self-realization, you have to meet your physiological needs. So like, air, water, food, heat, clothes, the ability to reproduce, shelter, sleep, safety needs, which includes health, personal security, emotional security, financial security. 3, which is social belonging and needs, which includes sense of family, friendship and intimacy, trust, acceptance, receiving, giving love and affection. And 4, esteem. The esteem needs are the higher level of esteem needs for self-esteem, strength, competence, mastery, self-confidence, independence, and freedom. And the lower level of esteem needs for respect and for others, to recognition and fame and prestige, and status, right? So all these things have to be met before you can get to self-actualization. And self-actualization is the realization of all your potentials. So what you're meant to do or what you're meant to be exists in what potentially you can do.
Right. If we go to the list, it states again and again, it's like, I'm going to say broadly security, but another way to look at it is that the competence that you develop throughout the process of discovering each of those needs, and I mean, we
Or
all
just meeting them, right?
right. We'll all meet our needs until we don't, and then we slowly die spiritually or physically. I'm just thinking it's interesting that competence is the root of like a lot of that.
Well, but it's competence because it does draw attention from others, which provides you some sense of esteem, right? It's recognition by others for your capacity. So being competent, right? So again, and depending, like professionally speaking, competence allows for you to move forward professionally, right? Because typically, or at least we're told, that the most competent are the ones that achieve greater degrees of success, right? But it's not a guarantee of it again, right?
Right.
It just means that the likelihood is that if you're highly competent, then it'll produce this a very real world kind of like successes, or lead to greater degrees of successes in a material world, right? So, but the ultimate expression of then becomes of the individual is self-actualization, but you can't get there till you meet all those other needs, right? So again, part of the human condition, you can look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs as is the evolution of the individual, right? And it directly contributes to the human condition, because if the majority of the people living within any given society are trapped within meeting their basic needs, then they never evolve past that, right? So the only thing that they're interested in is meeting hunger, desire for sex, someone to love them, but they never truly evolve as an individual. So after you meet all those needs, then you strive for self-realization. And now we live in a society where the technology allows for us to, on an individual, you don't have to seek institutions of higher learning. It exists in your pocket, right? And if you follow it, it can allow for you to self-actualize, then to become all that you were meant to be.
Right. Like, often when we discuss things, I notice the perspective some people might take that might be most obvious. They're not complete thoughts necessarily. Like, I see a lot of times you're taking lateral moves when you're thinking about a question. You'll change the question and you'll be like, that's the actual question.
Right.
It's
Because you're
strange. It's not strange.
no, it perfectly demonstrates problem solving. That you keep turning the problem over and over, and you look at it from as many different perspectives as possible, because you recognize that within the problem may lie the solution. You just need to be looking at the problem in the right way, and then the solution will present itself. So that requires you to, the exact words you use, a lateral movement. And when thinking about the problem, right? Well, that lateral movement now will sort of put you in a position to gain further insights to now choose a course of action that will resolve the issue. Perfect. Right?
That makes sense to me because if somebody's running into a wall and they don't have the wisdom to walk around the wall, it's likely because they choose not to be aware or there's something that's biasing them towards not being aware. I would argue it's their responsibility. It's within reason.
Again, it falls to what we were just finished saying about existentialism, that you take full responsibility for your own existence. And so then if you follow that reasoning, then the highest expression of taking responsibility for yourself is to self-actualize.
Right. Accept change and like really drive towards it.
Right. So self-actualization, the self-actualization need presents in all of us. And we use the word potential, right? And then it's a question of whether the potential is tapped or untapped, realized or unrealized, right? So again, we all exhibit it, but can only be achieved once all the lower needs are sufficiently satisfied, which we clearly demonstrated that here. You can't start self-actualizing until you're able to accommodate needs for security, your basic biological needs, need for esteem, safety and security, all of that, right? So self-realization means peeling away fabricated layers of one's own personality to understand the experience the true self, the unchanging consciousness, awareness of self, hence the true nature of reality, to awaken to the truth of who you are. You are the awareness, the consciousness behind the thinking. Right? So again, it's just, and it goes hand in hand with self-actualizing, right? So your identity, your personality, they're all constructs of thinking. But what you are is, and what you can experience is directly is the consciousness behind that. The awareness that's behind the thinking, behind your eyes, that allows for, you ever look into the eyes of someone, look into them deeply, and then you suddenly get this sense that that they're truly alive.
I mean, I've seen some pretty empty looking eyes before,
Well,
but they're
but typically eyes convey that there's something more significant to the individual,
right.
right? So that's all I meant by that.
It's unfortunate.
You're 100% correct, though. That there's some pretty deadpan eyes.
It's unfortunate. I think I've seen more people that don't have that joyfulness, that like sparkle in their eye.
But I think it's just because it's been beat out of them. They've been psychologically worn down, where now they're just waiting for their time to come, right? Because to them, the experience of life is kind of empty, right? It's only the responsible, the strong are the only ones who can have the real experience of joy, because they understand that it's fleeting, it's transient in nature. So when they are in the middle of the experience, they truly enjoy and revel in the experience. And they don't let it, that once it's gone, they don't let themselves become diminished by it.
It's very strange that like the frame of mind really changes who we are fundamentally. Like we don't know who we are because there's many people out there who have like, it's not that they don't believe they cannot change or they don't deserve it. It's just that something with time, I assume they just don't realize it's better to start the journey earlier than later. But that's for everything.
I think for a lot of us, like, there's no such thing as too late. You can come to it at virtually any age. Although there's more I would dare say there's probably more advantage to coming to it at a much earlier age than a much more advanced age, right? I would have loved to have understood all of this in my 20s, right? And it took me a lifetime to become the person that I was seeking in my 20s. To show me this stuff, I had to become this person, right? To evolve personally in such a way that I could learn from this person that I sought to learn from. I had to become that person. So, it took an incredibly long period of time to become that person, right? And to learn that, like, here, there's nothing fixed. The only thing that's permanent is change. That's it. And no single change in and of itself is permanent, because it's any single change is further subject to even more changes. So the state of change is constant. It's the only constant.
Yeah. Like the oldest mountain range you could possibly see, you know, it was much bigger 1,000 years ago.
Millions of years ago,
Yep.
and in millions of years, it might be the size of mounds of pebbles. The fact of the matter is that everything changes, and that you need to be receptive to the idea that not just everything, you and me too, right? And any kind of strive for permanence, or which is often driven by a desire for safety and security, like an overwhelming safety and security, is wholly unrealistic, right? Because no matter how good that any institution gets at being safe and secure, all it'll take is one bad event to undo them.
Right. Whereas a skill set, a healthy state of mind, that's the rest of your life.
Right.
Or until you like destroy it.
And the creatures that demonstrate the highest degree of survival are the creatures that are most adaptive. They're the ones who are best suited to survive. So that means if you're the most receptive to change and you can adapt to the changes as they occur, that will make you successful at survival. Not the smartest, not the strongest, academically smartest, right?
So, I guess
no.
I think adventure is actually a really good way to put it, because you adventure in every facet of life, really.
Yes. Yeah. So you can treat this forever for whatever it is that you choose to. To me, it's a grand adventure.
Which is meaningful, of course, because why would you get out of the house if it's not a meaningful journey?
Right. And get out and experience it. Live it. Right? Live it to the best of your ability, whatever that might be.
Sorry, I'm thinking I really want to watch The Hobbit. Something about it just,
Oh, you mean the fact that he kept, I'm going on an adventure! When he ran out of his, Baggins, is that what he called his home? Baggins? He ran out of, and waving the contract with the dwarves?
Right, but any good narrative or any good story has like this deep meaningfulness to it. Like it's not just that he has to do this great journey. He has to struggle with many issues in many ways. Um, like just not dying, not succumbing to the evil of the ring, stuff
Right,
like
right.
this. It's interesting because we live in a story in a sense.
It is. We're as a species, how we learn and how we convey ideas is through storytelling. So, like, so that requires heroes and villains and fantastic situations and circumstances, and then their interactions get played out on the pages or in terms of movies on the screen, and then the story that's being told, it resonates with us. Then suddenly we aspire to want to be like one of the heroes, or to experience the hero's journey, to go on the
Yeah.
grand adventure.
Yeah, something about it is so real. It presents us in a way that we have to orient ourselves towards it. It's like we're looking at the people could look at the villains, but we always want to look at the heroes.
Yeah. Well, some people might aspire to be the
Mega mind.
villain. But the truth is, it you know that what we're doing is storytelling in a manner of speaking. I mean, we use a lot of notes that I make to reflect an idea to explore in the course of our conversation. But in the exploration and in dissecting the idea, what we're doing is we're telling the story of the idea as we see it,
Right.
right? And then in the hopes that it actually might resonate with somebody else, that they might too get the sense of that, right?
I thank God for comment sections, eh? Because you can really add on to any of this.
Oh, well, that's the point. That's why we put a cap on it. But you could talk about this endlessly, and
Like each point
yeah,
too.
yeah, and we do.
This is a dense topic.
Yeah. Okay, so let's jump from the hierarchy of needs. And remember, all of this stuff is a reflection of the human condition in one way or another, right? And so we're going to move from self-actualization, and I want to talk about terror management theory, right? It is explained as both a social and evolutionary psychological theory originally proposed by Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon, and Tom, please forgive me for butchering his last name, is Pyszczynski, who wrote the book The Worm at the Core of the Role of Death in 2015, which proposes a psychological conflict results from having self-preservation instinct while realizing that death is inevitable and largely unpredictable. Conflict between the two aspects, the survival instinct and death, produces fear and terror. And it was something that you alluded to just when we were finishing up on self-realization. And it's managed by societal constructs that are a combination of escapism, cultural beliefs that counteract the biological reality with assigned significance. And it's an enduring form of meaning and value, countering personal insignificance represented by death, which is or death with the significance through symbolic culture. Right, so that we live on through you achieve immortality in a manner of speaking symbolically, right? And entire religions, like, because the hereafter, it's forever and ever, right? In literature, write a great opus and your name is venerated throughout time, right? Do something significant and you're remembered well beyond your years, right?
It also kind of institutes in a culture, like assuming that the definition is true broadly speaking, it also institutes like the proper way, like I'm using air quotes, proper way within within culture, like how to act in that context.
Yeah. So it informs your behaviors in light of the anxiety that's produced by a survival instinct that wants you to stay alive. That's why the survival instinct drives you towards safety and security. Plus the terror and the fear of knowing that you're going to die and it's unpredictable when and how. Right? Those you don't get to know. You only know that it gets to happen to you.
I think it's really interesting because some cultures have reverence for death. It's not something that's it's unfortunate the loss of the physical body of the individual, but the idea that there's no loss, like it's not. I guess what I'm trying to point to is the reactions we have are not appropriate, considering that when somebody passes, we should show reverence. In my estimations, like
Yeah,
why not?
you should express some gratitude for having known the person. I think that's important, that or that somehow that they were significant and meaningful to you personally. So we should have reverence for the dead. Now, as for death, I would say the only reverence that we're required to have for death is the fact that it's an experience we're all going to have, and that you would think because of that we're all sharing in this fate, that we would treat each other better. But there's so many of us who are only too happy to expedite the process for somebody to experience death.
Well, it's because it's a really nice shiny red car. Why wouldn't I,
Mm-hmm.
do some awful things for?
Yeah, no.
That's the extreme example.
Yeah, remember, it's an aspect to what we are, and you don't have to be traumatized or terrified by it. That that's why these things exist. That we have institutionalized religious ideologies that allow for you to base purely on faith, the idea that you're going to survive after death. The reality is we don't know what comes after death, and maybe nothing. It could lead to another reality, another experience, and maybe that's the ultimate. Wouldn't that be you wouldn't be able to prove it, but every time you perish, you die, just go on to another experience, right? And again, what that experience will look like, it'll take virtually any shape and form that you can imagine, right? So having said that, you would think that we would look at each other slightly differently, knowing the fact that all of us one day are going to pass. The worst, what's more tragic than death is to suffer a horrific fate and live through it and have to endure that. There's so In some ways, there are some things that are worse than death itself. And again, you would think that it would make us kinder, more open and understanding towards each other, but the fact of the matter is that it doesn't, right? And it's a sad state of affairs. Like, as far as I see it, you know, um, it's the thing that links us. It's one of the two things. We're born and brought into this world, and we're all going to pass from this world. You would think that, and not as a euphemism, that we would literally treat each other as family, as brothers and sisters.
We would at least recognize the death anxiety others have, but I don't think we recognize it in ourselves typically. Like in this culture, we don't even talk about death until it's like around the time that somebody you care about is passing, and it's too bad we don't discover more about it, because it would prompt us to go, okay, if we're uncertain of the afterlife or lack of, we have to be comfortable enough to go, okay, we're uncertain, we need to live up until that point.
So then it's really important how we then conduct ourselves here, right now, while we're here. And you know that you're here. And you're here with all these other people. So then what we do in the time from when we arrived to when we leave becomes critically important, right?
Right, people can look at that as just like a plain factoid, but that's a massive thing. It's not just representative of like a factoid, it's a way of life, it's the rest of your life. It's
It
all
can,
the moments in
that's right,
between.
it can inform every moment that you have. So then you can treat every moment with a deep, profound appreciation and a grand reverence for that, not just for your own existence, but for everyone else's. Well, then you would exist in a state of like uh, gratitude.
Hypothetically speaking, if you're magically put into a world and you can do all this crazy
Right,
stuff,
right.
you'd think you go, holy crap, I woke up again. This is amazing. It's beautiful.
Well, like I said, the fact is we'll never know how much truth there is to reincarnation. Although there's tons of examples of individuals who claim that they lived in the past and were able to recount details. I think it occurs it, the few times that I'm aware of it. It occurred in India, and the place children would talk about their families and the wife they left behind, and would give details about like beyond what a child of a few short years could recount. So like maybe like an 8 or 9 year old, 10-year-old, and they would be able to tell in explicit details about their other life in another part of the country, and then go to that other part of the country and discover, yes, there is in fact a family that was there, and they had a passing, and all the details they cited about where they lived and what they did are all true. So you can read into that all you want. To me, that it's just anecdote. So that is a form of evidence, but it's not compelling evidence. It's just this interesting kind of thing. So and Alan Watts used to say, he was a great Western philosopher who really made Taoism accessible to Western audiences, and he would state often that we're experiencers, and the experiencer can only move on to another experience. So what is death but another experience? So what comes after death but another experience? What shape or form these experiences take, you can read into it all you want. Right?
To be to be an experiencer, that's a strange thing. Because my brain wants to go, okay, we're part of some mechanism, like there's some purpose to it. But it's so wild and out there. Even speculation becomes very difficult. I mean, I personally, if I live to a normal age, I got a lot of years to consider this. But that's a big question.
Well, but in the consideration, the point is that it's supposed to drive you to behave in such a way there than what you do is you demonstrate from day to day, from moment to moment, a sense of gratitude for not only being here, but you're the interplay and interactions that you'll have with everybody that you encounter in the time that you're here. Make sense? You're
It's
like,
everything and
what?
everywhere all at once.
Yeah.
It's crazy to like define these things because it's like, how do you define like reality, like the meta construct?
Well, remember, it's incomprehensible and it's largely absurd. So when you say comprehend reality, I don't know that you can.
Most things are absurd if you really like.
Right. So then instead of trying to wrap your head around it, it might be far more easier and far more natural to be present. Just train yourself to be in the moment, to be right here, right now, because this is relevant. The fact that it goes on in every direction, infinitely. Define infinity for me. When something's infinite, like again, even if you could, how do you wrap your head around this idea? So I don't think that you can. So then ultimately, and because it conducts itself in such a way that you could characterize it as being absurd, I think that ultimately then what it says to me is that then it's instead of trying to understand what reality in the universal is, you may find it the quest for insanity, so that it might be more valuable and more relevant to train yourself to be present in the here and now, and to appreciate this moment, to have gratitude for this time, because this is what you can be certain of. Within the limits of your five senses, you only know that this is true. Right here, right now. You're like, stop it, you're fucking with my head.
No, I'm processing it. It's just, I'm kind of like, I don't think this is the best way to deal with somebody who has like emotional issues, but if somebody is going through like pure existentialism, the best you can tell them is like, don't try to reason out. It's all absurd. Let's have ice cream and just enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
Like, that is ridiculous.
But it's the truth of what you can do versus what you can't do.
Yeah.
You're going to still trying to spend your time conceptualizing the entirety of all existence?
Right. That's as insane as the people who go like, oh, you know, what is it? I forget the term for it. They're extending life. They want to do it like...
Oh, the transhumanists.
Right, the transhumanists. It's like, why? Like...
I don't, myself personally, I don't have a problem with the idea that they're trying to extend natural life so that you could live, say, potentially for hundreds of years. To me, in fact, I'm like, that might give you an even greater opportunity to cultivate real appreciation and gratitude for what it means to be here. But you should expire. Your time should come to a close at some point. So I'm okay with the idea of being alive instead of living for 70, 75 years, 72 years, or whatever the average is. To live 300 years, 500 years, 700 years, but then eventually you do expire.
Right.
Right.
I would agree with that. The concept of put my brain in a shell.
Oh God, ridiculous! Just silly.
It's like tear everything that was meaningful of me away. Just leave the processing and the reductionist part.
Well, I'm going. How do you separate a distinct part of a system that's entirely integrated?
Right.
You're going to lose something very potentially significant in trying to we're going to freeze their head until such a time as science can revive them and clone them a new body.
Right, because people do this.
No, I know.
What happens when the company goes under? You think?
I know. It's the ridiculousness of being human, right? So if you think the universe is absurd,
the human condition,
humans are infinitely more absurd.
You're absurd.
You're absurd. Okay, we're going to move on to logotherapy.
Oh, so, sorry, stepping away. Gotta go wash them.
That's okay. I can just keep talking. So logotherapy is a form of existential therapy developed by Viktor Emil Frankl. I happen to love Viktor Frankl. He was born in March of 1905 and he died in September 1997. He's an Austrian neurologist, psychologist, philosopher, Holocaust survivor, who founded logotherapy, a school of psychotherapy that describes a search for life's meaning as a central human motivational force. It is part of the existential and humanistic psychological theory, so it does overlap greatly with existentialism, right? So, founded on the premise that the primary motivational force of individuals is to find meaning in their lives, to discover a firm sense of purpose and meaning, right? Created with the Greek word logos, which is defined as meaning, and primary motivational force of an individual to find meaning in life, right? Which is therapy, right? So the tenets and basic principles of logotherapy are life always has meaning, even in the worst experiences, right? And you have to exercise the freedom to create meaning in all that we do. Human spirit is referred to in logotherapy, but the term spirit is not used in a spiritual or religious sense. Frankl's view, spirit is the will of the human being, the emphasis on the efforts to discover, search, create, and find meaning and purpose. Not necessarily the search for a God or other supernatural beings, although it could. Um, but better left to each individual to discover on their own. So then it could be said that this basic tenet of logotherapy is the search for purpose and meaning, and that there's not only an overarching one that you could apply to the entirety of your existence and all existence, but also situational and circumstantial, that in any given circumstance and moment and situation you can find purpose and meaning, right? So that you don't so then this is a primary component of that is being spiritual or having spirit, but not in the religious context. Although, again, as stated, it could be, but largely that it's the spirit of the individual, right? Which would equate to courage and bravery in the face of the most worst possible experiences. That it's that spirit that drives you to keep moving forward, right? That would provide the motivation for discovering the purpose and meaning of any given moment that you encounter at any given point in time in your life, right? Anything you might like? You just walked in. But...
I know we're speaking about logotherapy. I'm not sure what the first point you brought up was.
I can reiterate it really quickly. Logotherapy was founded on the premise that the primary motivational force of individuals is to find meaning and purpose in life, and to discover and affirm a sense of meaning.
So it's like the context in which we see ourselves too.
Right, and the person who promoted it was Viktor Emil Frankl, who was an Austrian neurosurgeon, a neurologist, an Austrian neurologist, psychologist, philosopher, and Holocaust survivor. So to him, it was more relevant and more important that each individual discover and affirm what meaning and purpose there is to their existence, and that it took on many shapes and forms. So you could have an overarching meaning and purpose to the entirety of your existence. You could actually even apply one, I guess, to the collective of humanity, but also that the meaning and purpose that you create could be situational and circumstantial. So then you create a meaning and purpose in any given moment as a result of any particular experience that you may be having, that because you may require to make sense and drive and to, not just to make sense, but to give you drive to get through the experience. So you assign a meaning and a purpose to the experience.
So logotherapy is like the context, the story. It's not ego. It's more like the roles in which an objective person would see, like not perceive, but see.
I think it transcends objectivity and subjectivity. It describes the search for life's meaning as the central human motivational force, and that it can be applied to any given moment in time. So like I said, so there can be a number of them. You can have an overarching one, which is the purpose and meaning to the entirety of your own personal existence, and then professionally, in your case, you're going to school. Your meaning and purpose while you're at school is to not only do well, but to really learn everything that you're there to learn, right? To embody it. So that becomes a meaning and purpose too. That's situational, that reflects the situation, but also in a broader sense, could be applied to your life in a much larger sense.
But it kind of deals with like the orientational view, if that makes sense.
he brought it into existence as a result of his experience as being a Holocaust survivor. So he survived being in concentration camp, and he came out of it with a relatively, stable psychology. And it was because even in the midst of those horrible conditions, he was able to derive meaning and purpose to his existence. Right? So for him, the reason it became a therapy was a way for people who had dealt with trauma and couldn't deal with the trauma, that if they could get a perspective where they could assign a meaning and purpose to the traumatic event, that it would be easier for the individuals who suffered the event to come to some degree of to make their peace with the experience they had, because they were able to see the meaning and purpose to the experience, no matter how horrible or tragic it was, right? And so it speaks to this idea that that you can endure the worst possible conditions and still come out of it as a relatively balanced and stable human being, that you didn't have to succumb to the weight of the tragedy.
This is interesting. I think it would apply to like culture as a whole, but it seems like it's most rarely available within our own lifetimes.
Right, and I think that was also his point, that because it's an individualized pursuit, that you as the individual have to determine your own meaning and purpose, and there's greater value in that, because it's not, now you're not adopting someone else's. You've thoroughly explored and come to some reasonable conclusion about yours, and then what you do is then you, for your own experience, you can provide meaning and purpose. Remember, for him to be able to survive the concentration camps, it was his ability to see that there was a meaning and purpose to it, right? And again, what he concluded was that if people have meaning and purpose in their lives, they can endure anything.
I mean, that's a pretty incredible thing to like suggest, because in the opposite, if you saw a culture where people are divided, they're self-centered, but not in the positive way, where they're genuinely looking at the logos, like at their own story, they would be looking at the world, oh, it's wrong, this is wrong, and then they would reflect it in their personal bias and their personal roles and attack, instead of going,
well, but they might not. They might see that the world being as it is, that it has its meaning and purpose,
right?
And then what's more important is that they derive their own meaning and purpose from their existence, and that as a result of that, it can heal, right? That it can bring them peace and perspective on their experience, no matter how traumatic it is.
I mean, he was in a concentration camp. I assume if he didn't go through the process of thinking about this, he would have just lost himself, I think.
Maybe it very well could have been the outcome, but it wasn't, right? And then as a result of that, because he was highly intelligent, he determined that there's a way to get past the most horrific experiences and the most tragic and traumatic experiences as a result of thinking through and assigning meaning and purpose to those experiences in a personal way. And then you could put those experiences to rest. And this is about the worst experiences, right? In particular.
Yeah, none of this is easy and convenient, like some sort of ad hoc ideology. This is a way of being that is directly accepting of the reality you're put in.
Right, and saying that it's meaningful regardless of whatever it is. No matter how good or bad it is, there's meaning and purpose to it, and that you have to tap into your meaning and purpose in the acceptance of the fact that that's its meaning and purpose.
Yeah, that's really incredible. Like from a death camp, like you'd think some guy's in a cozy chair thinking this up, never worrying about his life.
This is somebody who experienced it and then had that realization, and in all likelihood, and I you know that it was a result of that experience that he came to those conclusions. He had that realization. The epiphany occurred to him probably in the midst of the experience, and it's what allowed for him to manage the experience and then come out of it relatively psychologically undamaged.
It at least suggests that there's great availability for mental stability for everybody.
Well, I think that's what it offers. That it offers like that in unstable conditions and circumstances, it allows for you to maintain mental stability. That for you to, because you've determined that it's meaningful and purposeful, and then you endure it as a result of the fact that you go, here, I can endure this, right? That I don't have to succumb to the weight of it, that I can get past all of this. And then when I come out the other end, I'll be liberated from it, right? And essentially that's what happened, but I don't know how certain he could have been that he would come out of it. So the purpose was that here, I have to endure this. I have to have this experience. And then maybe as a result of that, it was like, here, as a result of having to have this experience, it elevated me intellectually to a point where I could convey the experience and go, here, you don't have to suffer the weight of your experiences, especially the worst experiences. That you don't have to cave under that weight. That you can rise up and evolve as a full-on human being.
It's certainly incredible because I mean the only other option is like you don't think about it someday, like in his situation many people they died from awful things. They didn't have choices in it. Some people just fell and they were done, exhaustion, and the fact he made it through with such a perspective.
Or they're victims of experimentation, which end up leading to their demise, right? Like,
Right.
But it might have provided them the strength of courage to face those experiences. So maybe that's, when you're able to assign meaning and purpose to your existence, then it gives you strength of spirit.
Right, the indomitable will.
Right. So maybe that's part of the human experience, right? And what we need to learn, which I don't see a lot of examples of, is this idea that as an individual, to be clear, it can overlap with any kind of religious ideology for you as an individual to create and come to the conclusions of your own meaning and your own purpose to your existence, right? Maybe that's part of the point of being here, right? Maybe that's part of the point of being human, right? That you're able to determine of your own volition what your meaning and your purpose is, right? And now you can, again, that can be influenced by biases, but that also means that that subjectivity isn't the only way to interpret the definition of meaning and purpose to your existence. You can do it objectively, right? So I think, can we get a time check?
2 hours, 18 minutes.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to call it a night. What do you think? You got anything you'd like to add in conclusion?
No, I have a lot to process. Like, a lot of these thoughts, you could argue, like, oh, of course, we do because we need to do. Oh, we strive because the opposite is to fall. But to truly believe in it, You don't even use the word belief.
Because I don't have faith. I believe in nothing.
Right.
To me, it's like, what is the most reasonable conclusion? Well, nothing's more reasonable to me than to assign and create your own meaning and purpose to your existence. And that meaning and purpose is not to be etched in stone. It's to be fluid. It should be dependent on what you're encountering from moment to moment.
It beats the hell out of being reliant on comfortability, complacency of others, reliability of others.
I completely agree.
Sorry,
It's okay.
can I ask one more time?
Sure.
The individual that went to the concentration camp that went through
Victor Emil Frankl is his name.
Victor Emil Frank.
Yeah, a really, really interesting fellow. Super, super interesting. And he died he was born in 1905 and he died in, I think, 1997. And he wrote a number of books, so which I think you would find probably quite interesting in terms of reads and stuff. But off camera, I can give you all that information. All right?
Noted.
Okay, cool. So then I think in closing, I would like to say, question everything, including yourself, especially yourself. Seek balance, seek knowledge, seek understanding. Become a renegade, individualist, humanist, critical, objective thinker. Thank you for your time. Have a great night, day or night, wherever it is you are.